Hey, and welcome back to The Caption Life. I am Sean, your co-host and TV/film reviewer, and in this bonus episode, we will be reviewing the latest MCU film, Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse of Madness. And in this episode, we do have a special guest reviewer, Richard Nebens, who is the writer and editor for the popular entertainment news outlet, The Direct. And just like all of our bonus episodes, whenever we're reviewing a TV show or a film, there will be spoilers. So if you have not seen Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse of Madness yet, I recommend that you pause this video, save it, go watch the film, then come back, watch this episode. Now let's dive right on in. Hi, welcome to The Caption Life, a podcast about how comics and pop culture impact life in society and vice versa. Before we get started with this episode, please hit that subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, and follow us on social media at Caption Life. And you can also find out more information and past episodes on our website, thecaptionlife.com. So here we are at the end of the opening weekend of the 28th MCU film, Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse of Madness. And we're going to discuss this movie right now. But first, we have a special guest joining the show to help us review the movie. Richard Nebens is a writer and editor for The Direct, specializing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He lives in South Lake Tahoe, California, owns a restaurant, loves playing video games, watching movies, and cheering on his LA Southern California sports teams. Richard has loved the MCU since its inception in 2008, kicking off his writing career in July 2019 before joining The Direct in March of 2020. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So, tell us a little bit about your restaurant real quick. I find that really fascinating because I've only known you on Twitter as a writer for The Direct, but I didn't know about you owning a restaurant. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So actually, unfortunately, that business kind of is in the wayside right now. We unfortunately had to leave the restaurant industry just because of, COVID and all that stuff. But,
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. But it was a great experience. I learned how to own a business, and now I'm doing this, full time. Obviously I've kind of gained this unofficial nickname, The Machine, because I write so much and I'm just doing this pretty much all the time. So yeah. I try to live up to it, but no, I absolutely love what I do, and I get to write about Marvel movies for a living. I don't have no complaints.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's essentially the dream, right?
Right. Seriously.
Well, and we were just talking about how over the weekend you were writing, I think you said like 9 articles in one day because of the, opening of this movie, along with other things that was being reported on, stuff like that. So tell us a little bit more about, what that part is like in terms of how many articles you write and in that process and everything.
Yeah, no. I write and edit for thedirect.com, and I also do social media there too. But no, I pretty much write anywhere from 5 to usually 8 or so articles a day, usually closer to the 5 range if it's a normal, not crazy, Doctor Strange opening weekend day. Mm-hmm. But no, I'm pretty much just there writing all the time. I love the site. I love that team. We have an incredible group of people. So I mean, if you want to see my work or anybody else's, just please go and check out thedirect.com. We just recently reached 1 million followers on our Twitter page, which is
awesome.
Absolutely insane. Blows my mind that we've come that far.
That's fantastic.
And, yeah, no, it's pretty cool. And no, shout out to the Direct. And no, it's just a great time. We have a great team, and I cover pretty much everything from Marvel to Star Wars, DC, mostly on the Marvel side, but I do a little bit of everything.
That's awesome. Well, and excuse me, I'm gonna have to cut that part out. Yeah. And for those of you who are listening, we will put that all those links to MCU Direct and the Direct and Richard's contact information, everything like that, in the show notes as well too. So I want to ask you one last question, and then we'll dive into the movie. But in your bio, it says you love playing video games. What is your favorite video game you like to play?
Oh, that is hard to pick, but it's actually not hard to pick now. The new PlayStation Spider-Man game.
Oh my gosh, right?
Oh man, I've done that one a few times over. I got the Miles Morales one when I finally got my PS5 a year after the PS5 came out.
I know that's a holy grail of games right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I cannot wait for the second one next year. It's supposed to have Venom and Kraven. It's going to be friggin' awesome.
Yeah, that trailer is fantastic. And I own both those games as well too. And I absolutely love not just the gameplay, because the gameplay is phenomenal, but the story and just how the rich depthness it has with being able to like walk around and interact with people and some of the side stories that you have as well too. It's completely phenomenal. I think it's really changed the game in terms of, the world that you kind of immerse yourself in with some of our favorite heroes that we've grown up with. So yeah.
I think they took some stuff from that game for No Way Home too, because I mean, obviously the May dying in that one and in the video game and the movie. I mean, but if you're gonna pick a video game to take any kind of inspiration for Spider-Man 4, it's that game, because they did an amazing job on it.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I agree with you 100%. That is a great game, and if you haven't played it, definitely check it out sometime. I know it's exclusively on PlayStation, but if anything, I mean, watch somebody playing it, because it is a phenomenal game. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I'm excited to have you here today to talk about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the film. Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse of Madness is the second Doctor Strange film in the MCU. And as I mentioned before, the 28th film for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And to date of this recording, May 8th, 2022, it has earned excuse me, let me try that again. And today of this recording, May 8th, 2022, it has earned $185 million domestically, $265 million internationally, with a worldwide earning of $450 million. It stars Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff, I always mess up his name.
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Yes, thank you.
It took me forever to get it.
I know. Well, and funny enough, I wanted to make sure I got it right, and I rehearsed it a few days ago, and I should have rehearsed it before this episode, because I was like, oh, I got it. I was like saying it over the weekend, and of course,
I've done it too. Don't even worry.
I appreciate that. Benedict Wong as Wong, Rachel McAdams as Christine Palmer, and Xochitl Gomez as America Chavez. It's directed by Sam Raimi, written by Michael Waldron, with cinematography by John Matheson and music by Danny Elfman. So let's go ahead and start with our initial reactions to the films. But first, before we get started with our reactions, just want to let everybody know again that we will be talking about spoilers on the film. So if you have not watched the movie yet, I highly recommend that if you don't want it to be spoiled for you yet, to pause this podcast, save it, go watch the movie, and then come back and listen to our episode. So this is your warning. Definitely pause now and then come back to us later. But
go see this movie.
Yes, exactly. Go see it. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's definitely a really great movie to check out for the MCU for a number of reasons, which we're going to get into. So let's talk about our reactions to the film. And Richard, I want to start off with you. What was your reaction to the film after you watch it? I know I saw you tweeted about it right after you watched the film, and I know you had some really interesting things to say, but I wanted to get a sense from you what you thought about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
I mean, like I said in my video reaction on my Twitter page, this might be the craziest wild ride the MCU has ever delivered. Like from the second the movie starts to the second the movie finishes. Like it's only 2 hours and 6 minutes, but there is something to see and something that you have to grab onto in every single minute of that runtime. And, Sam Raimi obviously does a great job. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I grew up on the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Those are my OG superhero movies. That's like what got me into Marvel in the first place. But no, he did an incredible job. There were some small issues I had through like here and there, but I mean, overall, it's just incredible that we are in a place where this movie exists. I literally have the Avengers on the TV beside me, which came out 10 years ago. To think that we would get this movie 10 years after the Avengers, it's just blowing my mind how far we've come.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I agree completely. I think for me, after watching this movie, it's very, very different from any other MCU film that we've had up to this point, right? I know that a lot of people have said that they think Marvel movies have followed a specific formula that tends to get redundant. And I feel like this movie kind of blows that formula out the water. Like you said, as soon as the movie starts, you hit the ground running, and it's fast paced. There's some, slow down moments, but it's definitely, with a 2-hour movie, there's not a whole lot of slow down time through it. And I think it's just a very different approach to what Marvel has done before, especially with this being more of a horror movie that they've said. Now it's PG-13, so it's nothing as intense as some of the traditional rated R horror movies, but it definitely has that feel from Sam Raimi. It has the horror elements. It definitely has the intensity level and some gory moments as well too. And I think it's just a great attempt at doing something different. And what I thought was really interesting with this as well too is that it's almost like some of the other team up movies that we've received before, in that there's a lot of smaller stories that kind of fit under a big umbrella. But this seems to be something that is still even different from those, because all of those kind of fit under a tighter umbrella. And I'm going to say this is a little bit bigger, just because Strange and Wanda are more central to the story, in America as well too, with what's going on. But it feels like they kind of dumped into these brand new stories, almost like a what if series. Like, these are all separate, that's kind of tied together under the Watcher. But I think this is just like what you said, this is just a fantastic movie to really get engaged with. And it seems like, from what I'm seeing, and Rich, I'd be interested in your take as well too, is that this is definitely a movie that people either love or hate. It seems like there's not a whole lot of mid ground for a lot of people. And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, I mean, I think I get it, because I think it's so jam packed. Like it's kind of hard, I think, to kind of keep track of like maybe some of the stuff that's happening in there, because you're going from one plot point directly to another. And there's, I'd say, probably a good 20 characters in this movie to keep track of. And I know Sam Raimi himself has said that he's never dealt with a movie with this many characters and this many stories before. So I do get some of the complaints. And I've seen some of the stuff too, that like they only go into like a taste of what the multiverse has to offer. I think just in a movie like this, and in just a movie in general, you can only go to so much. Like if you're traveling across the entire multiverse, because I know America Chavez mentions like how many universes there are in the MCU and stuff, but no, I think Sam Raimi did a really good job of handling everything. And some of the, obviously the bigger moments, we'll get into more spoiler stuff later. I mean, those just stole the show in this movie. But I do think too, it was a surprisingly like compact and tight story around, like you said, Strange, Wanda, America Chavez, Wong, those kind of guys. And I think they did a pretty good job of throwing so much into one movie. Right.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and I was really impressed, because I think I actually saw from the MCU Direct about this, where I guess Sam Raimi didn't watch hardly any of the WandaVision.
I'm pretty sure I wrote that one. Yeah.
I was about to say, I'm pretty sure you did too, but I didn't want to assume that either. But yeah, he didn't watch any of those episodes, which was really interesting, because I know I had somebody at work who I actually never talked to before. I posted something in Slack about how I saw it over the weekend and kind of just gave my, spoiler-free thoughts about it and everything. And he reached out to me directly and said, do I have to watch any of the Disney Plus shows? And I told him the only one you really have to watch is WandaVision, even then probably like the last 4 episodes. And then I saw that article about how Sam Raimi didn't even watch those. I was like, well, I don't know.
He said he saw a few scenes from it. Like I want to know like what key moments he saw, because I think he said something about some key moments that he saw from the show. But I mean, and I get it. Sam Raimi is he's making a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's 6 hours of content that's pretty essential to, making the movie that you're making.
Oh, no.
I mean, it also does depend on like how the release schedule worked out with when they were filming Doctor Strange 2 and everything. But still.
Yeah. Well, and they have people, on production and everything like that, whose job is to pay attention to some of those continuity things as well too, and kind of fill them in as well. So I don't think it's as critical for him to be as invested as we are with every aspect of the story and everything like that, because of what you said with being a busy person and, producing and directing a bunch of films and everything like that. But I'm still impressed with the fact that how it still kind of fits within, the continuity, and that there wasn't a whole lot of errors, it seems like, from WandaVision. So, yeah. So, okay. So let's jump into our top moments of the film. And originally I was going to call this the top 5 moments, but because it's you and me, I'm going to call it top 6, and each one's going to do 3 each. Yeah. So let me go ahead and kick off with you and ask you, what was one of your top moments from the film?
So part of my background, I've said this on other podcasts, is I went to music school. I'm a music major from the Berkeley College of Music. So you know where I'm going with this. The Doctor Strange versus Sinister Strange fight, where they're doing the score with the musical notes on the piano and everything.
Yes.
The visuals behind that were so cool. I mean, and we've seen stuff like that in like cartoons and other shows and stuff. But the fact that they brought something like that to real life with the creepy tone and Danny Elfman's score and everything, it just blew me away. It appeased the musician in me, and I was very, very happy with that scene.
Oh yeah. I agree. And I've told people, in fact, this is actually one of my top moments of the film, so I'm not surprised that you picked this at all either, but this was definitely at the top of my list as well too. And I told other people that I've talked to about this film is that it was very reminiscent for me of the movie Kung Fu Hustle, where they had that scene where the twins were doing the I forget what the instrument's called, like it's like a dulcimer or something like that, but they use and emphasize music to kind of help score the tone of what's happening in the movie. And this was done very well in that you had, the good versus evil, but just the balance of music and some of the, call outs that they've used as well too. And some of the needle drops. Like I think I heard Phantom of the Opera was in there at one point, and all that. And so, and the visuals, as you said, was just fantastic. I think it's one of the best visual effects scene in the entire movie, and maybe even of the MCU, just because it was so creative. Yes, it's so different. I will say the one thing that I thought was interesting, it's a little bit of a critique, but it doesn't really take away from me at all either, is that I was kind of confused a little bit why Strange saw the music sheets and then just decided to use the music notes to start fighting him. But at the end of the day, that scene was so fantastic. I'm like, I can forgive that. Like whatever his, motivation was, fine, whatever, because that paid off very well. So I agree. Yeah, that's definitely hands down going to be, one of the top scenes, I think, of this year. So
definitely.
For me, one of the things that was just a fantastic moment in the film for me is the scene where Doctor Strange put Wanda in, it seems like, the mirror dimension. And then she quickly figured out how she could use the reflections to transport herself into where they're at. And I thought it was really fantastic because there was just a lot of elements that went into it with the visual effects and how creative they can get with it, and even just a storytelling, just thinking about how you are setting up a way where she can get into where they're at using reflections and finding, different reflections. Because as a viewer myself, when I think Dr. Strange said that, she's using reflections to try to get in here, all of a sudden you start looking at where are all the possible reflections at, and you're looking at, I think there was like a gong or something like that, the puddles and everything. And so from a storytelling perspective, from a cinematography perspective, it was just really cool to see them do that. And it was very reminiscent of The Ring in terms of how she's like climbing out of that.
Super creepy.
Yeah. So it was definitely, it was a great call out to a horror type of feeling within the PG-13 realm as well too. So I thought it was just very well done with all the layers and complexities that they did with it. It just really paid off for them at the end. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said, the horror vibes from Sam Raimi in this, especially during that scene, was, I mean, he shined with that scene completely. And no, and the thing too, I was thinking, Strange needs to figure out this mirror dimension thing, because after what Wanda did to him in this movie, and Peter Parker beating him with math in No Way Home.
This shouldn't be his go-to anymore.
he literally beat Doctor Strange with high school geometry.
Yes.
Like, I love Doctor Strange. He's one of the best characters in the Avengers, but he got beat by a teenager and somebody who figured out reflections. And given Scarlet, which is, I think, clearly the strongest character in the MCU now, but still.
Definitely. Yes. Well, and you know, what's funny is, people who know me will laugh at this as well too, but I am not a Doctor Strange fan at all in terms of a character. I read him in the comics when I was a kid, and I just never got behind his character or the mystical world. But I will say that the Doctor Strange movie was very well done, even though I still didn't really care for him as a character. I thought the world and the visual effects that they did in that movie was great. And then this one just kind of blew it out of the water. And like I said, I think it's probably the best visual effects of any of the MCU movies that we've had so far. So yeah, it's so even though I'm not a fan of Doctor Strange, it's still a great series that they've had in the MCU so far. So
yeah.
All right. So what's another top moment from the movie for you?
Well, what I was just thinking about actually comes kind of near the end with Wanda and America and Wanda's family during that final fight where America Chavez opens up that portal to her Westview house, and you get the two Wandas interacting with each other. And I'll say this, I was actually kind of shocked with how much of a role Billy and Tommy had in this movie. Maybe I shouldn't have been, because it really was all about Wanda trying to get her family back. But the emotion behind that scene where you've got like the Scarlet Witch Wanda, confronting Mother Wanda. And I mean, just realizing the emotion behind what she'd done. She pretty much tried to take over the world in an effort to get her kids back. And I mean, to some extent I get it, but I mean, she was absolutely ruthless in that pursuit. Yeah. But then seeing how much it, came crashing down to earth for her when she interacted with her other self, in that, through that portal, it was just that just absolutely made me drop.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and I will add to that as well too, is I love that scene for a different reason. And I'll say it's because up to that point, it seemed like there was no stopping Wanda at all, because they've had the Illuminati try to stop her and they couldn't do it. They've had Doctor Strange in a number of different ways try to stop her and they couldn't do it.
All the Sorcerers of Kamar-Taj.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they all it seemed like she was just unstoppable. And that was because they were all trying to use physical, mystical forces to stop her.
Exactly.
And what stopped her was America figuring out that she needs to kind of, play on her, emotions a little bit, because she knows that she was trying to get her to think about, your kids are going to know what you did and everything like that. And she's like, they'll never know. And so she realized that is where the crux is going to be. And so she has to expose her to them to stop. And that's exactly what she did. So she used her intelligence to be able to stop Wanda by putting her in the situation to expose her for what she is. And that line Wanda said later on when she's trying to reassure the kids, it says, "I'm not a monster," where this whole movie was showing, how vicious she can be because the Darkhold was affecting her, and just how she pretty much was tearing people apart, literally, is just, I think, was a moment for her that she realized what she had done and what she had sacrificed, what's meant sacrificing her kids in that process on some level. And I think that's what brought, you actually saw that in the visuals, that's what brought Wanda back and took the Darkhold power away from her, is that she became Wanda at the end, which is reminiscent of Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock.
Totally.
Another Sam Raimi film, right?
Sam Raimi had his imprint all over this movie. I mean, as he should, he directed it, but this was as much a Marvel movie as it was a Sam Raimi movie. And, and I love the fact, I don't know if you mentioned it before, but the fact that like Marvel's really letting their directors direct these movies. And like, it's been for better or worse in Phase 4 alone. I mean, like Chloe Zhao in Eternals, like she, no disrespect to her or anything, because I think she did a great job with the movie. I've just got my own issues with it, bringing way too much into one movie, but they really let Sam Raimi like just go for what he wanted to go for. And and the funniest thing is, mentioning Spider-Man 2, is he threw a Doctor Strange reference into Spider-Man 2 that everybody glosses over. Like I think he's probably subconsciously wanted to do this for the better part of 20 years. And I'm just really glad he finally got to make a Doctor Strange movie.
Oh, I know. Yeah. That whole scene where they're trying to figure out what to call Doc Ock, right? And, and that Dr. one person.
Crap. Science squid? Crap. Doctor Strange. That's pretty good. Mistaken.
Mistaken, yes. So we know there's a Doctor Strange in that universe.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that was yours.
That was my two.
Yeah, that was your two. So my second one, I have to say I really love the interdimensional transport scene with Strange and Chavez because again, the visual effects in this movie I think was really one of the highlights. In addition to the storytelling, was one of the highlights of this movie, and I thought that scene was really cool because they got to experiment with just different kinds of visuals that you kind of saw in What If, in that one scene between the Watcher and Ultron where they're going through different ones and they kind of threw, Darth Vader's castle in the background there. This was really similar in that we had some reminiscent scenes from Infinity War where Thanos had used the Reality Stone to change like the physical composition of Drax and
exactly.
I'm forgetting it. Mantis. Yes, exactly. And so we saw that in this scene as well too. And I don't know if that was a call out to that or that was supposed to be something completely different, but then we also saw them go through all these other different dimensions. They were animated at one point, which Strange was so like, cool. Yeah. He's like, were we painting at one point? And so it was really interesting to see all the different kinds of dimensions that they kind of packed in there. And I think it was like a 45-second or a minute scene. And it was just really visually engaging and interesting to see that. So I really love that scene of the movie where it seemed like the visual effects artists just had a lot of fun with that 1 minute, which I know they have a lot of fun doing some of that stuff. I also know they have, some of the, biggest challenges with doing that stuff, but that seemed like that was something that they probably absolutely love doing it because they could probably get really creative with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a crazy scene. And like, I remember we had done a bunch of articles on the direct. Like, I think somebody at one point spotted Mustafar in there from Star Wars potentially. Yeah. And like, I don't know if that's like real or not, because they possibly did that in What If also. Right. But like the What If animation, like for that split second that they went into the animated world, it looked like Doctor Strange looked like the way he did in What If. And that was a pretty cool nod to that series there. Oh yeah. But no, just visually, and like we saw some of it in the trailers, obviously, with him breaking into kind of the stuff that Drax did when he did Infinity War. But that whole scene in itself was absolutely nuts. And I mean, obviously it showed how powerful America Chavez is. And just real quick, shout out to Xochitl Gomez in this movie. She absolutely killed it in her first MCU movie, and I can't wait to see more of her in the MCU later.
I'm hoping they're doing a Young Avengers movie or series.
Oh, they
or
have
something.
to be.
Yeah,
there's no way. No, this is.
They're introducing all the characters for it. Yeah,
my wife has said this for the better part of a year that Young Avengers are coming. They've got Billy and Tommy. They've got Eli in Falcon Winter Soldier, Loki, Kate Bishop, Miss Marvel. Now America Chavez. It's gonna happen. It just depends whether it's a TV show or a movie, but it's happening.
which is just crazy because it's like there's so many things that seems like it's in the works that I made a joke on TikTok one time. There's like a crazy popular soundbite that says, someone's saying like 30,000. I basically said like, how many projects are we going to get in the next 2 years? Because it seems like they're just grabbing everything that they can and running with it, which is great because I think it's working for them in the long run and all that. So it's just it's just really fascinating all the directions they're going with. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So our last moment of the film for each of us. What is your final and possibly top moment of the film? I bet it's probably the same as mine too, but I'm curious to see what you say.
If you're thinking the Illuminati, it's got to be it.
Yes.
I mean, this has me at a loss for words. Literally for the last 20 seconds. I mean, when you were going into this movie, could you have ever imagined? I know we heard the rumors. I know what we saw in the trailers, that this movie would feature Patrick Stewart as Professor X, Anson Mount as Black Bolt, Haley Atwell as Captain Carter. You got Lashana Lynch as Captain Marvel, and friggin' John Krasinski as Reed friggin' Richards. Like, I mean, they actually did it. I cannot believe it. Like, I remember my brother took this video of me because he actually works in this company where he got to see, stuff beforehand, and he heard all the rumors and stuff. When I saw Reed Richards on screen, I flipped. Like, I mean, absolutely went nuts. I felt really weird because about half of the crowd didn't, but I didn't even care. That was arguably one of the coolest moments in MCU history.
Yes.
I don't know if we're going to get John Krasinski for, the canon real Fantastic Four in the MCU when that day comes. I really hope we do. I really want Krasinski, but the fact that he got to play him at all was just incredible. I couldn't believe it actually happened.
Yes. No, I agree. And that's exactly my experience as well, too, is I knew Xavier was coming. I mean, there's no doubt of that. And we already had, I don't think I knew about Black Bolt. Like, I assumed Black Bolt just because he's always been a part of the Illuminati, but it was always questionable, like who they're going to have for it. But Reed Richards I was hoping it was Krasinski, but we didn't have any sort of confirmation that Richards were going to be in it at all or not. And so I was the same way. As soon as he showed up on the screen, I started flipping out. I didn't say anything or scream or anything like that, but I was physically like throwing my hands up in the air and like kicking in the air and all that. Like that was probably the like the highlight of the moment for me, is just seeing Krasinski in that role. I'm the same way. And I hope that we somehow get him in more MCU movies as Reed Richards, because I think he just did a great job in that role. And I think, I know a lot of people are saying that Marvel is listening to the fans when they say this. And, on one level, I'm like, yes, because if they know that you're saying this, they know that you're going to come see it and pay to watch and everything like that. Exactly. But at the same time, I think it really paid off for everybody, because just like what you said, even if we don't get him, in more MCU movies, either as Reed Richards or any other character, I think it would be, I know I'll be saddened by that, but at least we have this moment that we saw him in that role and just played it beautifully for 5 minutes before he got killed off, unfortunately. But but it's just that whole scene, just like you said, was fantastic overall with everybody that played those roles. And I think it was just so great. And one of the things that I keep in my mind is that, yes, this is the Illuminati, and yes, they were killed off in this universe, but that doesn't mean we can't pull in those same characters, from different universes or introduce them into this MCU universe.
Nobody stays truly dead in the MCU.
Yes, that is true.
For better or worse, but
yes, exactly. There's always a way to come back. I mean, if in the comics, Fantastic Four actually went into the gates of heaven to bring Ben Grimm back, I think they'll be good. I think they could do that.
Exactly.
So Ben Grimm. I'm sorry, I said Grimm.
Ben Grimm. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So. All right. Well, no, those are all great moments. And I agree. I think those, it's hard to top any of those, but they're definitely going to be, the highlights of the movie. So let's talk a little bit about what are some criticisms of the film that we may have. And as much as I love any movie, I always try to keep an open mind that, there's something that can always be better. Now, whether it's a big flaw or anything like that, that's a different question. And so, just because there's a criticism doesn't necessarily mean that it takes away from the movie or anything like that. But I think it's always good to kind of talk about what we think may not have worked in the film, or where it could have been better if they went in a different direction, in our opinion. So let me kick it back off over to you again and see what kind of criticisms do you have of the film, or what did you wish you could have seen in this film?
Well, there's a couple of things I can think of. The one that I think that's probably bothered me the most is that the Mordo thing. I don't mind it all that we got Master Mordo, because I think Chiwetel Ejiofor did actually a really good job with this new version of him. But I'm just kind of sad that we didn't get any kind of follow-up, like at all, on the original Mordo from the original Doctor Strange, because that was a pretty big plot thread that he was going on, too many sorcerers. I mean, that put the world into some serious danger. And I mean, you saw how easily he took out Pangborn in that post-credit scene. So I was kind of bummed that we didn't get any follow-up on that. I mean, maybe they're saving it for a future movie, or I don't know for sure. Obviously, we haven't heard anything about it, but I wouldn't mind them seeing them touch on that at some point. I was just bummed that they didn't do it in this movie.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I think that was the interesting thing that my wife and I talked about after the movie. We said the same thing. It's like, so has he just been, around for 6 or even 11 years, depending on if he was snapped away or not, just taking away other, magicians or wizards' powers. And then clearly we still have tons of wizards around, because that scene of Kamartaj around there, like I think it begs the question, like, what are they going to do with that story if they're going to bring that back in somehow, and how they're going to explain like what he's been doing since then. And maybe they have a plan for that, like you said, but it's just, I think it's just kind of left to be desired at this point. So I agree. I think for me, one of the criticisms I have is that I love the fact that it was very fast paced and that it just kept moving. And I think some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. I loved it in the sense that it was definitely different than all the other movies that we had before. And I think it worked well. With that being said, I think it was really too fast paced at the beginning, because I believe in the first 15 minutes, it pretty much established Wanda as the villain. And then she was just going, 100% into, I'm coming over to Kamartaj and I'm going to take America's powers, and they had to stop me. So it kind of just dove right in there. And I think that was one of the areas where they probably should have slowed it down a little bit and kind of let it develop a little bit more instead of jumping into it. But again, I think because it was a 2-hour movie, it made sense why they did it that way. But I think that was probably something that would have benefited if they maybe kind of expanded out a little bit more, especially for people who maybe aren't familiar with WandaVision, that probably may have not done their homework. And I think that's one of the challenges that the MCU is going to have, is telling a story in and of itself without having the entire audience rely on all these other stories to really be caught up with, which I know that's kind of the point with some of these movies. And I think that makes sense if you're doing Avengers and all that. But when you're doing that for a character specific movie, I think it presents itself as another challenge. And so I think that would have been a good opportunity to kind of help develop that a little bit more for those who may have not seen WandaVision, to kind of get more of the backstory and to kind of slow it down a little bit and let that character story develop before they just kind of throw in and say, yep, Wanda's the villain and we're just going to run with it at that point.
Yeah. And it's funny too, like, it made me actually think about another movie from earlier in the year. I don't know if you saw the Batman, but that one, I just felt like it was way too long. Like, they could have probably cut about, but the problem is, I don't know, like, if it was just shortening up scenes or like taking scenes out. I think it could have done better with being maybe, 20, 30 minutes shorter. Mm-hmm. Like, I compare it to that because I feel like this one could have actually benefited from a little bit more of a runtime. Like, I'm not talking much, maybe 10, 15 minutes or something, just to kind of, spread things out a little bit, make things a little more digestible, throughout. Maybe like you said, a little bit more on Wanda before she like truly becomes the main villain. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think this movie could have benefited from just a few more minutes of runtime, because like, we haven't gotten a movie this short in the MCU. I haven't done the research on it, but it's been a long time. I mean, this is the shortest movie of Phase 4 pretty considerably. I think Shang-Chi was maybe like 2 hours and 12 minutes, but that was also an origin story, and you're just setting up the character and everything. Right. But we haven't had a movie this short at least since, I think, probably the end of Phase 3 for a character this big and this like integral to the MCU. So no, I definitely agree with you on the runtime front. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and with the Batman, what they could have done to cut out some time is speed up how quickly he was walking around Gotham City. Well, yeah, there's that. He was just slowly walking everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, other criticisms or things you think the film could have benefited from? I think too, and this is just how much ambition the MCU has. Mm-hmm. I think it could have benefited more. I think Wanda, I don't mind that she was the villain, but I feel like it did divert a little bit hard from where she was at the end of WandaVision. Mm-hmm. Like I think they could have maybe made it so that there was a little bit more of a redemption story for her, because that's really what all of WandaVision was about, finding some kind of redemption for her. I know she was, seen as a pariah and everything at the end of that series for what happened in Westview. I mean, kind of rightfully so, I guess, but no, I mean, and it's a tough line to walk, because if you're going to make Wanda the villain of this movie, I mean, there's literally nobody that can stop her. I mean, like you said earlier, she took out the entire Illuminati and it didn't even look like she broke a sweat. Yeah. This was through a body that she possessed. Yes. So like, and I mean, Wanda is obviously nothing to be trifled with. And I love how Elizabeth Olsen played her. I think they could have just done with maybe a little bit more of like, I don't know if they needed to take her so far away from what they did in WandaVision. It obviously, like I said, it's a tough line to walk.
Yeah,
but just that.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that was the challenge they had. And I think what they were trying to do to divert from that a little bit is talk about and emphasize how the Darkhold was pretty much taking over her and was influencing her so much. But I do know that I think a lot of people really just know that Wanda has gone through so much trauma at this point that to make her the villain was something that I think a lot of people weren't wanting to see, which again, I think this is one of the reasons why some people either love her or hate it. And so I do know that for me personally, like you said, I'm okay with Wanda as a villain as long as they have a plan to kind of wrap her story into a way that gives her a happy ending that doesn't make her to be a villain, you know, in all of time for the MCU. Because again, like, yes, exactly. Because in the comics, we see people, you know, flip back and forth all the time. And I think people in the MCU, people have seen Wanda in the MCU go through so much trauma that they just don't want her to just end up being a villain because of circumstances and everything like that. And I think a lot of people just love her as a character and rooting for her and want her to have a happy ending, basically. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I know for me, I have two, and they're really small, you know, and because I've only seen the movie once.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of just going on memory right now, and they're very small things. And I will say that this doesn't really detract for me from my enjoyment for the movie, because I still think this is one of the best movies that we've had in phase 4 so far. And so these are just very, very minor things, but just things I noticed. One, I don't know if this was me, because I try to talk to other people and I feel like some people haven't noticed this, or I just haven't met the right people yet to agree with me on this. But Xavier's hover chair, as cool as it was, I felt like it was way too high on his chest, that he didn't really look comfortable with it. Like I described it as he looked like a toddler that was slouching in a high chair because his arms weren't like naturally, you know, by his
sides. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It almost looked like he was like outstretching them, you know, this way and everything like that. So I thought the whole time when I was watching him in the hover chair, like I was focused on that. And I don't know if I was overly focusing on it or not, but that being said, I still love the hover chair. I think everybody loved that part, and especially with the X-Men music playing when he entered and all that.
Amazing.
Yes, everybody loved it. It was just, again, it was a scene for all the fans from all the different, you know, properties and everything like that. It was just such a, you know, great fan service. I'll say that definitely what it was. You know, it added to the story, but it was definitely fan service at the same time too. The other kind of small issue I had is, as much as I love the visual effects and think that this is the best visual effects we've had of any MCU film so far, I was surprised that in the scene with Gargantos, when America and Gargantos first shows up in New York City against Strange, there were some scenes and some frames where it was clearly that the visual effects seemed like it wasn't completely finished and polished like it was in the rest of the movie, which stood out for me because that opening scene that we had was beautiful in terms of visual effects. It all looked very realistic. You couldn't really tell, you know, where some of the stuff was false in a sense. And so they all did a great job with that. And so that for me, the part with Gargantos, and it wasn't the whole scene, but there was definitely moments in there where I saw Strange and it clearly doesn't look like a real human Strange, but a CGI Strange in that regard, you know? And I'll say this, I noticed that in Doctor Strange, the first movie, in a couple of scenes, but those were, in terms of perspective, they were so far in distance that you couldn't really pick up on it unless you focused on it and watched it enough times. For me in this scene, it seemed like I picked it up really quickly and it just kind of stood out for me. But like I said, that is being nitpicky in a sense. It's just something I noticed that it kind of took me a moment out of the movie experience, but everything else with the visual effects, it was beautifully done. So that's why I'm like, you know, if there was more moments like that throughout the movie, I would be upset with, but you know, because the whole entire movie was fantastic, I'm not going to be too upset, because I know that's probably not the visual effects artist's fault by any means. My guess is it has to do with like deadlines and budgets and stuff like that. And that's really what it comes down to is, you know, you're doing with what you're given. And sometimes that is the best you can do given the circumstances, not the best that you can do, but the best you can do in those given circumstances. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And also a quick shot on that opening scene of that Michael Waldron cameo in the opening scene. That was amazing. we had him on at the Direct during Loki. Our guys at the Direct podcast interviewed him, and that was so cool seeing him in that opening scene.
Oh yeah,
that was awesome.
Oh yeah, that was great. All right, so that was our favorite moments and some of the things that we thought the area could or the film could improve on. Let's talk a little bit about the connections to the MCU and comics. So, want to ask you, we know that there are definite connections to the MCU, and want to ask you what stood out for you the most in terms of what we saw in this movie, and that was a call out to either the MCU or anything that's Marvel proper that's cinematic. So things that outside the MCU, but the big films like X-Men and Fantastic Four and Inhumans or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole Illuminati thing was amazing. I mean, bringing in Antimatter Black Bolt. I mean, the fact that they got him in that movie from pretty inarguably the worst, Marvel TV show to come out in recent years. I mean, yes. And the fact that he made it good, like everybody really, I think, enjoyed seeing him in this movie. I mean, that was pretty impressive. Obviously, like you mentioned, the X-Men 97 theme coming when Charles came in on the hover chair. There was also, I can't remember the line exactly, but there's also a nod to Days of Future Past with Charles Xavier. I think right before they let Strange go and join the fight and everything. Yes. So that was a really cool nod.
Yes. No, you're exactly right. And the only reason I know this is because I actually watched that film before, like the day before watching Doctor Strange. And he said that word for word. It was something about just because someone, stumble along the way doesn't mean they're lost. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. And he said that, I think, about himself in Days of Future Past and said about other people. So the fact that he said it, word for word here was a great call out to that as well, too. And definitely, that movie, Days of Future Past, is definitely one of the most memorable movies for a lot of X-Men fans, just because it has a lot of different meanings in terms of, quote unquote, fixing what happened in the original X-Men movies. And the fact that this was, influenced, or at least the title was influenced by the animated series as well, too. But yeah, so there was a lot of those things that was in there. And I think, like we talked about before, it was really interesting to see people talk about what are the key movies and shows that you definitely have to watch before seeing this movie. And I think it really just came down to Doctor Strange and WandaVision for the most part. I think the other stuff is like, it'd be good if you watch it, but not necessary to the story. But just like what you said, I think, being able to pull in Black Bolt from the show and pull in, Patrick Stewart as Xavier, and having Haley Atwell come back and, play the live action version of Captain Carter that we saw in What If and things like that, I think was a fantastic move for them, because it was one of those things where it's just like Spider-Man No Way Home. They didn't use that as a cheap trick for the fans. A crutch. Exactly. Yeah. It worked well with the story. And what I also love about this is getting away from the MCU and doing more of the comics, is that I read some of the Illuminati issues before the movie, and the Illuminati in this universe is exactly how it works in the comics, in that they're always behind the scenes trying to run the show without anybody knowing. And you got that sense, and that this is a very much a utopian world, because they're like the most powerful people on Earth, and they're very cocky about themselves, because when they said that, we'll take care of your witch, and they think Strange is the worst thing, the worst person ever to come across their universe. And they were obviously wrong about that. Kind of shows, they captured that part from the comics pretty well as well, too, with that. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. So I have to ask you this, because I had a conversation with some people in a Discord channel that I'm in, and we've had a lengthy conversation, and I don't think this conversation is going to die. And I don't want to say anyone's right or wrong in this aspect, because Marvel likes to, confirm but not confirm things a lot, and at the end of the day, for me, it's like, whatever. I'm okay with whatever. This is, if I had to pick a side, this is what I would go with it. But in the scene where they're at Earth 838, Christine Palmer says that their Earth in our MCU is Earth 616. Does this mean that this is actually Earth 616, or, what's going on with Earth 199999 designation that Marvel has actually said is the official universe for the cinematic universe? But there's been a lot of, clues that this is actually Earth 616, starting from Thor, where Selvig, had it written on a board, and then Loki had it written on like his little, life film strip that they had and things like that. So there's been a lot of teases to that. I'm just kind of curious what you thought. Like, is this Earth 616 or is it still 199999, or how should we think about that?
I would probably lean toward it being Earth 616. And then there's also the, I know it didn't obviously turn out to anything, but the Mysterio mention in
yes.
Far From Home that this is Earth 616 out from Earth 833, I think it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would probably lean more toward it being Earth 616. But obviously, I mean, it's hard to tell with so much involved.
Well, I will say this, a lot of the people in that Discord channel will be happy with you, because I was arguing with them that I thought it was still 199999 in the sense that, for, Marvel Productions purposes, and maybe, inside the universe, they still call themselves 616. But I think they'll be very happy.
It's a lot less syllables. I'll say that much.
Yes.
It's a lot easier to say the line like this is Earth 19999 rather than, this is Earth 616.
Exactly.
Like, I think it just rolls off the tongue a little better.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. My buddy, JT would actually be happy with that, because we had that exact conversation where he's like, Earth 616 is just much better to say than 199999. I was like, we just call it MCU and just get it over with.
Oh no, that'll come in Deadpool 3. That'll come in Deadpool 3.
That is true. Yes, which I can't wait for. I
neither.
Yes, I think it's going to be great, especially with Sean Levy on there, and they've had such a good rapport with some of the other movies they've done before. I think it'll be a really good movie for sure. So
Deadpool 3 is probably my most anticipated Marvel movie, just like of everything that's coming up. I want Deadpool 3 so badly, because you throw Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson into the MCU and it's going to be endless. They can make that movie 3 hours long, and I don't think anybody would have a problem with it.
No. Well, especially if they keep going with the direction of Secret Wars. Yeah. I would love for them to do Deadpool Secret Wars as part of their movie. Amazing. I think that'd be awesome if they did that. I think that would be genius if they pull that off. So, okay. Yeah. So some things about what lies ahead now that we watch this movie. What lies ahead for the MCU? What are some of your takes? What do you think is going to happen in the future from, what we've seen in some of the end credit scene, or just what we've seen in this movie in general? What are you excited about? What do you think are some, still some lingering questions that we might still have, things like that? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's two things I'm thinking. I don't think Wanda is gone, because I think there's no way. They didn't actually show her dead the way they did with the Illuminati. So Correct. I think there's a big chance that she's coming back. She's way too powerful for them to just knock her out, even with that big of a monument on Mount Wundagore. Right. But so that, and then obviously they're going back to the Dark Dimension. I mean, I can't believe that. That's another one. Charlize Theron as Clea. I mean, that's going to be absolutely crazy. I mean, now that they've all obviously put some of the stuff with Christine behind him, that relationship, now he gets to, go along with this immensely powerful character from the comics, who's an incredible sorceress in her own right. But the Dark Dimension is coming back, and I can't wait to see what that. I mean, obviously Dormammu stole the show in the first movie, so I can't wait to see them go back to that.
Definitely. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think for me, we already touched base with some of this, like the Young Avengers is, with America Chavez being in this movie. I think it's going to happen, whether it's a series or maybe an exclusive Disney Plus movie that they make. Maybe they'll experiment with that. I think at some point they're going to have them team up, whether it's, soon or later on. I think that's going to happen. A few things that I thought was really interesting. I think these are more questions that I have still than anything else is, first of all, I think with this movie still bringing in cameos, a lot of people still talk about, are Marvel movies just now, even though it's a Doctor Strange movie, is it just, really a team up movie like the way that Captain America Civil War was? And I think what the movie does really well in this is that even though they brought in cameos, they're really small and they weren't at the same level as Captain America Civil War. But I do hear people in what they're saying that, are we ever going to get a character movie where we're not going to have a bunch of cameos like this as well too? And so I'd be curious to see how they do that. They still continue on, we're going to have these character movies, but we're still going to pull in like a couple of people from other ones into the movie. I would love to know if they're going to bring in some of those same actors of the Illuminati back into MCU Earth 616.
Agreed.
I would love to maybe have them reprise a role, or whether it's a permanent role. Like you and I both on the same page in terms of we would love to see John Krasinski back as Reed Richards. And I would love to see all the characters back on some level. And I don't know about Patrick Stewart. I think Patrick Stewart might have one more movie in him, but I think they might be looking for maybe James McAvoy to pull him back in if he's interested in that, or, just rebooting all the characters.
Patrick Stewart is 81 years old. I will take, whether he does another one or not, he has put in his work, and even just for getting him for that little bit in the MCU was enough for me. And I am okay with whatever Patrick Stewart we get, even if it doesn't happen.
Yes, exactly. And I agree. And I think even if we don't get Patrick Stewart as Xavier anymore, I think this was just a great call out because, again, we got the animated hover chair. We got the classic, the fingers to the mind and the fingers pointing out, that we see all the time. Yes. And again, definitely fan service, but I think this was something that people will be okay with if this was his last film. Just because, of all the circumstances. But I would love to at least see all the other characters and the actors that play them back. The last question I have, and this is a conversation I've had with many people as well, too, is that are the trailers revealing too much in what's in the movie? And the argument I made is yes. And I consider them like official spoilers because it comes from the production company and not like somebody leaking it illegally. But I think they have to reveal a little bit because they have to entice people to come see it, in the first couple of weeks to make as much money as they can. So, pointing out to people, like for me, it's like Doctor Strange. I probably would have waited a little bit if I had not known that Patrick Stewart and some other people are going to be in there. So I know for me personally that I probably was going to see it opening weekend. I mean, I'm not going to kid myself. I'm always going to see the MCU movie when it comes out opening weekend, but I assume there's probably people like me who probably would have waited until later because they're not a fan of Doctor Strange or whatever's in there and all that. And so I think they have to tease a little bit, but I'm curious to see what you think about, are trailers revealing too much? Is that a bold strategy that Marvel's going to do? Is it going to bite them in the end? What do you think?
I think Doctor Strange actually mostly did an okay job. I mean, I think they could have gone maybe without like the Haley Atwell stuff and the later Patrick Stewart thing. I think what they did in the Super Bowl trailer was just enough to get everybody like really intrigued about this movie because you could tell that was Patrick Stewart. There's no way it could have been anybody other than Patrick Stewart.
Right.
Now I mean, obviously what the stuff with the trailers, people are thinking back to the whole Spider-Man fiasco. And that was, like I said, a fiasco in and of itself because to this day, I wish we could have gotten the marketing tour that we would have gotten had none of the leaks happened. I heard rumors that it was going to be like positioned as like this Strange versus Spidey battle, like in the trailers before we knew about Doc Ock or Green Goblin or anybody like that.
Yeah.
But that was just a whole thing in and of itself. But I think for the most part, the trailers have mostly been pretty good. Like I said, I think we maybe didn't need the Captain Carter or the extra Patrick Stewart stuff, maybe with the wheelchair. I think they probably could have saved that for the movie. But for the most part, I think they handled it pretty well for this one, especially since there was a ton that didn't get really, really leaked. Like, I mean, obviously some of the Illuminati stuff and Clea, that kind of stuff.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it'd be interesting because I think that's always going to be, and let's be honest, it's not going to appease everybody. Like no matter what they do, somebody won't be happy. Some people love it. Some people hate it. And that's just the reality of anything. And, as much as I love the MCU, there are things that, I hate about how things happen and all that. And
me too.
I think that's just the challenge in film industry right now. So
exactly. And that's always to be the challenge with Marvel because they were really the first ones to do this giant, massive cinematic universe with, 20 different properties interweaving with one another. And they're still doing it 14 years later, which is a feat in and of itself.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Well, awesome. Well, that wraps up our review of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Richard, I want to thank you very much for joining us today to share your thoughts on the movie. And before we let you go, why don't you tell us where we can find you online?
Well, thank you again for having me. It was very fun. I am on most social media platforms, just at Richard Nebens, Richard Nebens. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I don't really do a lot of TikTok, but I'll check it out. Maybe I'll start doing that someday. But I'm mostly on Twitter. I write for thedirect.com. You can find our pages at MCU Direct, DCU Direct, Star Wars Direct, PlayStation and Xbox also, and our main The Direct page. You'll see me writing there pretty much all the time. My kind of output, but I love doing it there. And I'm mostly on Twitter, and you can find me there, and I'm busy as always.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll share those links in our episode notes below as well too. So thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you, Tim.
And that wraps up another review episode of The Caption Life. We hope you enjoyed listening. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button on whatever major podcast platform you're listening to us on. You can also follow us on social media under the username @CaptionLife. If you like what you're doing, give us a shout out, tag us in your posts. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionlife.com.